Kelly Johnston is an associate professor of curriculum and instruction at Baylor University. Her research examines literacy as a relational and multidimensional practice, drawing on sociocultural and affective perspectives to understand how literacy shapes students' identity, engagement, and sense of belonging. Her work brings together literacy studies and interdisciplinary perspectives on learning and development to expand how literacy is understood and to support responsive approaches to teaching and learning. She is published in journals including Reading Research Quarterly and Language Arts, and serves in leadership roles within literacy research organizations such as the Literacy Research Association and the National Council of Research on Language and Literacy. Her recent NCTE policy brief, Integrating Literacy Across K-12 Health and Physical Education to Support Whole Child Development, linked below, advances an interdisciplinary vision for literacy that connects research, policy, and practice to support whole child development. Kelly will share her work at AERA coming up in Los Angeles. Check out AERA's online program to see all the details on her session and our Research in Reading and Literacy SIG's presentations, posters, and roundtables. So pleased to see you today, Kelly. Thank you very much for joining me.
Thank you for having me. It's great to see you.
So your report centers on connecting health and physical education and literacy. How did you come to be interested and study this connection?
Yes. Well, it really draws me to the physical and health education context, and really a lot of the interdisciplinary spaces where I've done research or more practice work is this foundational belief that literacy is already at work wherever people are making meaning and communicating. So that includes spaces that we don't typically think of as literacy spaces. But that's, really the grounding of the field of literacy studies. So I'm really drawing from really new literacy studies scholars. And you can see in the brief, I'm pulling from a really foundational work from Ernest Morel, Elizabeth Moji, and really just taking up this tradition that literacy is more expansive sometimes than we recognize on a day-to-day basis, and also more expansive sometimes in ways that we've organized school around it and that schools tend to treat it. And so what draws me is the question of what then does that actually look like in practice, especially in a space like physical education or health. And I'll add that, really working with students in these spaces over the past, 5 to 8 years, it really starts to come to life when you work with children and youth who, and we see this in our data, they maybe are still developing some of the technical skills around reading and writing. And so they get an opportunity to do that. But what we've seen is that even more so, a lot of times they're doing already the conceptual work of meaning making in a deeper way. And so what we found is that when we started trying to take up those expansive understandings, we're able to recognize that and bring more attention to that with how kids are doing that, even though they may still be developing skills in a different way.
Yeah, so interesting. Wow. We don't see this connection being made very often. So can you share a little bit about the connection between health and PE and literacy and why that connection is important?
Yes. So, when we think about what literacy is, we also want to think about what it can do, and what it can do, especially in a young person's life. And that's where kind of that connection can become clear in a space like physical and health education. So we want literacy to help students think critically and understand themselves and the world and participate in their communities. So we're kind of taking up some of these bigger ideas of what we're hoping, the literacy will do for them. And sometimes just the physical and health education context allows us to do that. So we're kind of thinking, yes, we care about the skills that we're developing, but that we see that as one part, right? How can an expansive approach help us to kind of think beyond that, to think about criticality, identity formation, multimodal expression, embodied meaning making. And in the policy brief, I draw upon other researchers who are making those connections, which is really cool. There's kind of a small niche of researchers like Kim Oliver, Corinne Wickens, Kelly Chandler Olcott that I've cited in there who are kind of making the connections in those spaces. And really, in my own research, I've done research on this in a program called REACH, which I also talk about in the policy brief, and that's with a scholar, Dr. Risto Martinen out of George Mason, where we're really trying to explore this. And some examples that come to mind. So and we've done reach across some different states, and there was one of our sites in California where we were doing this with a group of youth, and so we get into kind of how they were taking up different literacy practices to really engage in what ended up being critical media analysis. And so it was a part of when they were also doing physical activities in tandem with that. They were, choosing images from magazines that meant something to them, writing about their choices, discussing body image and identity, kind of as they were engaging with different activities. So the idea is to kind of use the connection as a way to really deepen their meaning making, not only in how they're thinking about themselves, but how they're using different literacy practices to think about the world beyond.
So interesting. I'd just like to make a couple of connections here. So when we think about the pressures in our schools for students to learn foundational skills and to be able to demonstrate those skills through large scale assessment and things like that, then we do find that sometimes our content areas are left on the sidelines, and also PE and health, I'm sure. So this sounds like a really neat opportunity to sort of revive the work in the PE and health classroom and make those connections to literacies in a way that we maybe haven't seen as much in the past.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, really, it's just taking a step back to say, what are we already doing, but how might we shift just a bit in the way that we're approaching to really make the most of what we're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. So you've explained this connection really well, I think. So what can educators and educational leaders do to strengthen this connection for students?
I think one of the most important starting points is, of course, working with what we already have. So it's less about, trying to come up with a new curriculum or new resource, but it's more about a shift ideologically and how we are approaching, how educators and leaders are approaching and understanding what's already happening in their spaces. So one of the most significant findings from our studies with Reach, we're noticing over time, over years, that our structures that were supposed to be supporting literacy engagement and development actually stayed the same. It was when the coaches that were implementing and the educators who were implementing, when they kind of reconceptualized what counted as literacy engagement. So moving from just trying to like identify these discrete skills and when they were happening and trying to assess for that right in the moment, but really stepping back and kind of re-envisioning literacy as this broader meaning making, how students were connecting it to their lives and communities. Um, that kind of ideological shift profoundly affected different outcomes for those students, right? Because the emphasis same structure were there, but the emphasis kind of shifted a bit. And so, that finding also aligns with I mentioned Wickens and Parker in the policy brief, what they've found in their work with pre-service teachers as well, that perspectives on literacy integration shift significantly through hands-on experience, reflective practice, and just even getting that kind of broader understanding of how literacy connects reading, writing, speaking, listening, but in these expansive ways that affect how students see themselves. So it's really a mindset shift, is what I'm saying. And this can look differently, of course, depending on if you're a classroom teacher versus if you're a physical or health education teacher. And so it's not about anyone taking over the purpose of their content or their class, but it's about recognizing that it is all connected and that we can kind of be working towards some of those same goals, even in our different contexts.
And through that, better understanding the students in their classrooms.
Yeah, absolutely. It's, and we've long had these kinds of debates or conversations around like what's the purpose of schooling, right? And what's shaping the actual implementation of curriculum in a classroom. Should it be student-centered and responsive, or is it curriculum-centered or responsive? And so those are, I think, ongoing tensions that, but it's worth having these conversations.
Absolutely. Well, Kelly, thank you so much for chatting with me today about your work. It's very interesting, and we will share your links in the newsletter.
All right. Thank you
Thanks.
so much.